The citizens of Tarrant County, Texas began demanding answers from the sheriff's office in April of 2024 following the death of 31-year-old Marine Corps veteran Anthony Johnson Jr. Anthony was arrested on April 19th of 2024 after allegedly threatening a driver with a knife during a mental health crisis. Prior to his arrest, Anthony had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. The citizens of Tarrant County weren't outraged at Anthony's arrest. They were outraged at the fact that Anthony passed away after being in jail custody for only 2 days. At first, the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office described the incident as a medical emergency resulting from a struggle during a contraband check, but it didn't immediately release any of the footage. It wasn't until May 16th, 2024, nearly a month later, that Sheriff Bill Wayborn held a press conference to release approximately 5 minutes of edited video, which contained both surveillance and cell phone footage. The footage clearly showed Anthony being pepper sprayed and restrained, with one jailer kneeling on his back for over a minute while Anthony was handcuffed, face down, and repeatedly telling the officers that he couldn't breathe. The Tarrant County medical examiner ruled that Anthony's death was the result of a homicide due to medical and chemical asphyxia.
31-year-old Anthony Ray Johnson Jr. died in April. The Tarrant County medical examiner says he died by asphyxia, and in parenthesis puts it was mechanical and chemical. So we're asking questions about what exactly that means. Johnson's family, in the meantime, has told us that he was in a mental health crisis when this happened. Video of the incident, as you can see inside the jail, does show a struggle and a jailer even placing his knee on Johnson's back.
Needless to say, the video outraged the community of Tarrant County. And with that scrutiny came more outrage about how the Tarrant County Sheriff is running the jail. An investigation was launched which revealed that nearly 70 people had died in custody at the jail since 2017. And to give you an idea of how insane this jail was, here's a couple of examples of the accusations against them. In 2020, a woman who had a documented history of developmental disabilities and severe mental health problems gave birth to a baby alone in her cell while in captivity at the jail. And this ultimately led to a $1.2 million settlement. And unfortunately, the baby did not survive. In 2021, another woman with mental disabilities died from apparent dehydration after being in custody for several months, leading to another $750,000 settlement. And in 2022, another woman with documented intellectual disabilities and a severe seizure disorder was left unchecked in her cell, where she sustained multiple injuries from her condition that left her in a medically induced coma for weeks. In just 2 short years, the cost from the lawsuits alleging neglect and mistreatment from the jail staff are now nearing $5 million. And that's not counting the attorney's fees. So obviously, the people of Tarrant County were pissed, and they wanted answers. Enter a man named CJ Grisham. CJ is a Texas-based civil rights attorney, a military veteran, and a prominent Second Amendment advocate. He served over 20 years in the Army as a senior counterintelligence special agent, and even went on combat deployments in both Iraq and Afghanistan. After his service, he became an attorney and the founder of Open Carry Texas, which is an organization that advocates for Second Amendment rights. Obviously, CJ actively practices law and specializes in defending citizens who suffer civil rights violations involving the First or Second Amendment. So CJ was the man for the job. And on January 14th of this year, CJ decided to attend a meeting at the Tarrant County Commissioner's Court. CJ was there to take part in the public comment portion of the meeting, where he intended to read the names of all the people who had passed away recently in the Tarrant County Jail. And like I said before, CJ is a huge Second Amendment advocate, so naturally, he doesn't go anywhere without his firearm. And of course, going to the Commissioner's Court was no exception. CJ entered the building with no issues and was allowed to move around without anyone questioning him, but he was concealed carrying at the time, so it's not like anyone would even know that he was armed. So CJ entered the commissioner's court and sat for several minutes before eventually deciding to go to the restroom. As he was leaving the restroom, CJ ran into Executive Deputy Chief Craig Driscoll of the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office. CJ knew Deputy Driscoll from a prior incident that they had had involving pretty similar circumstances, but at the local courthouse. And the two were on cordial terms, according to CJ. That was at least until their small talk coming out of the bathroom turned into an interrogation when Deputy Driscoll asked CJ if he was armed. CJ told the deputy that he was armed, like he always is, and then the deputy informed CJ that he wasn't going to be going back into the meeting with his firearm. Well, needless to say, CJ took exception to that, and well, that's where today's video begins. So let's just dive right in.
26C credentials. Read the fucking law, Chief.
You want to go to jail for disorderly conduct?
Why, for saying fuck?
Quiet down.
For saying fuck? That's a what? You seriously want to take a First Amendment attorney to jail for saying fuck?
If you disrupt in front of the...
No, you are violating my rights by not letting me go back in here.
You're not going with it.
Under what law?
You're not a Texas peace officer.
I don't have to be a Texas peace
You're
officer.
not an honorary retired peace officer.
Qualified DOD law enforcement officer.
You're an analyst.
Right there.
You were CID.
I was counterintelligence. I was not an analyst. I was a counterintelligence special agent.
CJ's right.
What is this?
He went over this on the internet.
You generate your own little badge, that's fine.
CJ's right.
11666 is my badge
You're not
number.
going in.
T-Cole doesn't get to decide what federal agent. No, they do not, because I don't have to fall under T-Cole licensing.
So you're falling under Bear County, doing the same thing too? Bear County, the same thing to him.
Is this fraud? Is this a fake license?
Let me ask you a
No, don't
question.
shush me. Is this a fake
Let me ask you a
license?
question. Why didn't you carry your gun
free
into the
speech.
courthouse?
I did.
No, you weren't. You were making
Yes.
a lot.
I've seen this before.
I carried it
I've seen it
into the
before.
courthouse until your people changed the rules.
So why didn't you carry it in? Why didn't you go past us?
Because I made an agreement with you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so I won't do that agreement anymore then.
Okay.
I carry in every
Then you'll
courthouse
suffer
in the state.
consequences. You'll face the consequences.
And you will too when I sue your ass because you
Okay.
know exactly what the fucking law is, and it doesn't say T-Cole. It says 926C, 18 USC 1926C.
right here.
You don't have to debate it. You just gotta violate. You just gotta protect my rights. Excuse me. Don't touch him. Don't fucking touch me.
Don't start doing that shit.
Excuse me.
Back the fuck up.
Don't tell me to relax when you're assaulting.
Get your fucking hands off me.
You're assaulting. Don't tell me to relax.
Man, get your hands off me, man. Stop fucking touching me. You bumping to me.
And I will serve.
Hey, what's your name?
Don't tell me
What was your name?
touching me.
Since you want to assault me, you bumping to me. I didn't touch you or touch anybody else. You bumping to me.
As soon as you get my stuff out of there, I'll leave. And I want everyone's name and badge number, Chief. Where you at? Everyone that's right here, I want everyone's name and badge numbers.
Don't fucking touch me either.
Your guys are.
I don't give a fuck.
Sheriff.
I don't care, Sheriff. Who's offended? Who's offended? You can't be. Civilians are look for one.
All right, let's pause here for a second because this guy is kind of important to the story. This is Manuel Mata, and he's not just some random guy who happened to be at the commissioner's court that day. Manuel is somewhat of an auditor slash citizen journalist himself, and he mostly covers things that take place around the Fort Worth area of Texas. And he's had a few run-ins of his own with various law enforcement agencies. Manuel has been represented in court by CJ in the past, so it's safe to say that they know each other quite well. Now, you're about to see Manuel get arrested, and we will come back to that later because it's difficult to tell what actually happens to him from this angle. But luckily, he was recording the interaction as well, and it shows exactly why he was arrested. We'll take a look at his angle of the events in a moment, but just keep him in mind for now.
For what? Who's offended? Oh, shit. God damn, man. What the fuck are y'all doing?
We're resisting.
I'm not, asshole. I'm not. Who's offended? Who's offended? Y'all can't be offended by what I just said.
Is somebody being arrested for free speech here?
Yeah, man. Y'all fucking insulting me, motherfuckers. What's your name? Hey, go get my shit, CJ. What's your name?
Somebody got
on my stuff.
somebody got his cell phone.
Do that for me.
Somebody got his cell phone.
Oh, let's go.
You lost your qualified immunity.
What is he under arrest for?
They're getting me for UCW, even though I have a license that I can carry. Excuse me, I'm not even tensing up, motherfucker. What are you doing? Don't sit here and try and play it for the camera like I'm tensing up. I'm going legally. Yeah, it's mine. You're telling me to relax while you're falsely arresting me? Have you read 4615?
Just go back, guys, please.
Sheriff, I've got my law enforcement credentials in my pocket, Sheriff. Don't do this. Sheriff, in my back pocket. I just showed it to the chief. Well, then check it right now and get me out of these cuffs. And then read Penal Code 4615. You can't even arrest me for unlawful carry because it doesn't apply to me. 4615 is non-applicability.
All right, so now we're at the most interesting part of this interaction that warrants a little bit of legal investigation, if you will. We're still going to come back to Manuel's arrest, so don't forget about him, but let's take a look at what CJ is saying here. And first, let's establish CJ's claims. He says that Texas Penal Code 4615 exempts him from the firearm prohibitions that typically apply to Texas citizens because he is a retired DoD counterintelligence special agent. He also cites subsection C of 18 U.S. Code 926 to support his claim, which is a federal law we'll talk about in a minute. Now, I don't want to bog you down too much with the legal analysis, but this is an important critique because CJ might be operating on some shaky legal ground here. And I don't want to turn the hero of this story into a villain or anything, but let's just let the law speak for itself. So the main law that CJ is citing is Penal Code 4615, which basically just lays out who is exempt from the state's gun regulations. This code does have a provision for special investigators, but it refers to Article 2A002 to define what qualifies as a special investigator. Now, if we take a look at that article, it lays out some very specific roles within the federal government that the firearms exemptions from 4615 apply to. Now, I'm not going to read all of these, but spoiler alert, a counterintelligence agent with the DoD is not on the list. The closest thing that would even be questionably applicable from this code would be a special agent of the Criminal Investigations Command of the United States Army. But it is highly unlikely that this would apply to CJ, and here's why. So for those of you who don't know, there is an entirely different set of codes and laws that apply to members of the military. This is known as the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and it's essentially the military's own private judicial system. It only applies to the people who are in the military, but it operates just like any other legal framework, with a few slight differences. The UCMJ is what gives military officials like the military police the authority to apprehend and arrest other members of the military. But like I said, this legal framework only applies to members of the military, and it's entirely possible to be a law enforcement officer within the military that has no authority to arrest anyone outside of the military. This is an important distinction because it is also entirely possible for a military officer to have the authority to arrest both civilians and military members. Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, there are a bunch of different agencies that exist within each branch of the military, and not all of them are granted the authority to arrest citizens. Typically, in order to be granted that authority, you have to be a member of a special criminal division of the military. So in the Army, for example, they have the Criminal Investigations Division. In the Navy, they have the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. And then there's also the Office of Special Investigations in the Air Force. And I think you get the point. These are typically the only divisions of the military that can carry any actual law enforcement authority outside of the military. And counterintelligence agents generally only have the authority to arrest under the UCMJ. And this is where it also goes back to the federal code that CJ mentioned, 18 U.S. Code 926, which is part of the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act that was passed in 2004. This act allows qualified current and retired law enforcement officers to carry concealed firearms nationwide, regardless of the state law, with a few exceptions like federal buildings and private property. In subsection 2C of the code that CJ is citing, it clearly states that the firearm exemption only applies to individuals who held statutory powers of arrest. Statutory powers of arrest basically means that you can arrest citizens along with military members. and that's typically not a status that is granted to counterintelligence agents. Now, it's entirely possible that CJ obtained statutory arrest powers through some other means, like working in a civil law enforcement capacity before or after his military service. But if he's hinging his argument on his counterintelligence credentials, I don't see that holding up in court under Texas law or federal law. Now, again, CJ might hold some arrest powers that we're not aware of, but that is not the claim that he appears to be making in this video.
It's in my left back pocket.
Bear County had to learn the hard way. Bear County, they had to learn the hard way. I saw the video. I saw it.
Would you like to make him here so you can identify
You go that way?
law enforcement?
Okay.
We're gonna do this publicly.
Let's step back here.
CJ claims that the deputies took him to a secluded room and told him that he could return to the meeting if he agreed to disarm himself, but of course, CJ refused. The deputies informed him that he was being detained until they could investigate the situation and connect with the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, which is otherwise known as TCOL. Apparently, TCOL told the deputies that CJ wasn't a legitimate law enforcement officer, but according to CJ, after some pushback, they realized they were wrong and released him. In his follow-up live stream, CJ makes a few more legal assertions that I think should be addressed. I'll just play the clip here so you can see what he claims from his own live stream.
And of course, my argument was I used my 4615 exemption as a retired law enforcement with the proper credentials.
Onto West 7th Street.
But regardless of me having credentials, anybody can carry in there because they don't have signage up under what they're supposed to have under 30.6 and 7 supposed to keep guns out. They have a little no gun sign, but that's not what they're required to have. They're required to have 30.6, 30.7, 30.5 signs. So they didn't even have it properly posted for anybody could have carried in there legally.
So he claims again that Penal Code 4615 makes him exempt, and like I said before, unless he has obtained some type of statutory arrest power somehow, then the exemption wouldn't apply to him. But then he goes on to say that federal law enforcement officers do not have to meet Texas standards for firearm prohibitions in Texas. But let's go back to Code 4615 and look at what is the only section of the code that he could possibly make a legitimate argument for being entitled to, which is subsection A5. This subsection allows an honorably retired police officer or other qualified retired law enforcement officer to be exempt from firearm regulations. But there's one problem here. Not only are retired officers required to have statutory arrest authority under the federal law, but they also have to hold a certificate of proficiency under Section 1701357, which is issued through TCOL. Look, I've looked at this from every angle I could because honestly, I like the idea of an attorney who is also a former federal agent standing up to corrupt officials in a small town. But based on my interpretation of the relevant laws, I don't think he's actually right about this one. I don't think that CJ actually had the lawful authority to carry a firearm beyond what the average Texas citizen does. And in his live stream, CJ also says that the Tarrant County Commissioner's Court isn't displaying lawful signs on their buildings because they don't meet the standards set forth in Penal Codes 3005, 3006, and 3007. But again, this just seems like a misrepresentation of the law because the signage requirements in those codes only apply to private property, not government property. Government meetings like the one that was taking place at the Commissioner's Court are explicitly designated as gun-free zones under subsection A14 of Penal Code 4603. So there are no sign requirements for a building like the Commissioner's Court because the building is already inherently a firearms prohibited area by law. Now again, I just want to make it abundantly clear that it is entirely possible that CJ somehow acquired the statutory authority to make arrests through some unknown source, which would in fact grant him the firearms exemption. But again, that's not the claim that I'm disputing here. The point that I'm trying to make is that being a counterintelligence special agent in the Army does not grant law enforcement authority beyond the military. And that appears to be the argument that CJ is attempting to make. All right, now let's not forget about Manuel Mata, because although CJ somehow managed to talk his way out of being arrested, Manuel wasn't so lucky. So the last time we saw him in the video, he was being slammed against a wall and arrested. Let's take a look at what happened to him from his perspective.
You don't have to debate it. You just gotta violate. You just gotta protect my rights. Excuse me. Don't touch him. Don't.
Hey, don't start doing that.
Excuse me.
Back the up. Back
Don't tell me to relax.
Get your hand off me then.
Don't tell me to relax.
Man, get your hands off me, man. Stop touching me.
You bumping into me.
What's your name?
You bumping into me.
What was your name, ho? Since you want to assault me.
To me. I didn't touch you or touch anybody else.
What's his name?
You bumping into me.
Hold that door.
George.
As soon as you get my
Loser.
and I want everyone's name and badge number, Chief. Where you at?
All right, here.
Everyone that's right here. I want
What's your
everyone's
name?
name and badge number.
Don't touch me either.
Your guys are.
Mata, you're
I don't give a
you gotta go
I don't
to jail
care,
for disorderly
bro.
conduct. You can't use that kind
Who's
of language.
offended? Who's offended? You can't be?
Well, there are civilians.
Well,
in
go
here.
look for one then.
Take him
For what?
Take him for disorderly conduct.
Who's offended?
Behind your back.
Oh, shit.
Behind your back.
Come on, man. What the fuck are y'all doing?
We're resisting.
I'm not, asshole.
As you can see, Manuel was arrested for disorderly conduct for using curse words after being physically shuffled around by the deputy. This is obviously a bullshit arrest, but that didn't stop the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office from releasing a statement in their defense on the same day they made the arrest. According to their version of events, Manuel aggressively demanded the names and badge numbers of deputies that were present and continued this disorderly behavior to the point that the court had to be shut down. And apparently this is why he was arrested and charged with disorderly conduct. Not only was this meeting well beyond shut down by the time he was arrested, but Manuel was only cursing in the first place because he was being shoved around by the police officers. So ultimately, I think Manuel might be the only one to have a legitimate lawsuit against the Tarrant County deputies. Manuel was eventually released, and CJ has publicly stated that he will be representing him at no charge. Following this incident, CJ issued a demand letter to Tarrant County seeking $150,000 for his own detainment and another $150,000 for Manuel's arrest. He also told the Fort Worth Star-Telegram that if the county didn't respond by February 14th that he would launch a lawsuit, but I wasn't able to find any records of the county paying CJ anything or of CJ filing a lawsuit against them. So I'm not sure if he ever actually followed up on that letter. Now, before you leave this video thinking that CJ Grisham is an uninformed or a bad attorney, I personally don't think that's the case. This is just one instance where my interpretation of law is different from his. And that doesn't take anything away from the fact that CJ is a legitimate attorney who has successfully litigated cases in the past. In fact, there's one case in particular that I plan to cover in the future where he probably has a really solid case against the city of Aransas Pass and its city council. We'll save that for another episode. The question at the heart of this story is not whether CJ Grisham is a good guy or a bad guy. It's whether the law means what it says, even if the person holding the gun thinks that it doesn't apply to them. CJ walked into the commissioner's court convinced that his background put him above the rules, and maybe that's understandable. I mean, 20 plus years of service, federal credentials, and courtroom victories. It's easy to see how someone might start to believe their cause and the law are the same thing. But that belief doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Not in the statutes, case law, or in the way that Texas handles firearm restrictions in public buildings. The reality is that for all his conviction, CJ's legal footing looks a lot shakier than he's letting on. And while he was able to walk away from this encounter untouched, the same can't be said for Manuel Mata, who simply showed up unarmed, recorded the same event, and ended up in cuffs for merely raising his voice. And something just doesn't sit right with me that Manuel was the only one who actually faced any real consequences for what happened that day. And this is clearly a situation where nearly everyone involved was wrong in some way. If this story proves anything, it's that knowing the law isn't always enough. CJ demonstrated that confidence, credentials, and charisma can get you a long way with law enforcement. And this whole situation shows that sometimes it matters more who's doing the talking and who's doing the listening when it comes to police interaction. And honestly, I could go on for days about all the things that could be taken from this particular interaction, but I think I made enough points for today. I know this episode features a little bit more of me talking than my previous episodes, so let me know what you guys think of the video to commentary ratio on this channel. I'm still relatively new to this style of content, so I'm just trying to bring you guys what you actually want to see. So let me know if you'd prefer less of my rambling bullshit and more of the original videos, or if you prefer more commentary, storytelling, and legal investigation. Anyway, that's all I got for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.